Welcome everybody here, Brady from BGWX, and we're going to be breaking down the potential snowstorm next week. Yes, we're going to be talking about that. I know that's the hot topic, but we also have a major winter storm on tap for this weekend too that is really going to cause problems. So there's two major topics of discussion, and yes, I think chances will continue through February too, which we won't go into that too much, but because there is a lot to talk about. But without further ado, here, let's get started here, and yeah, let's get cooking. So, here, as you can see, the storm we had from last night and today here, and that's moving out of the way. Produced snow, freezing rain. I picked up about an inch and a half of snow, as I mentioned last night. So overall a very solid event, but in terms of expectations, and that kind of sets the stage here. Cold air, and we have currently pretty windy out. Can hear those 30, 40, 50 mile an hour wind gusts going on here in New England across the Northeast currently. But as you can see, this big trough and big dynamic piece of upper level energy is getting dropped across the Western U.S. and that comes in, and here's where things start get pretty interesting, and I still think tricky in the forecast here. Remember, if you notice, if you watched the video last night, we talked about it. We have this big TPV lobe, but the story is going to be the TPV over the next week or so. Multiple different lobes here. And then you can see the tail end of this confluence from the previous storm, right? Meaning this is just going to these two will work to block to prevent an all out cutter completely. So this storm is not going to be able to keep amplifying. See how strong this piece of upper level energy here at 500 here again. This is 500 millibar vort. Again, we look at the atmosphere here. To simplify it for those that are curious, oh, that's a terrible pattern drawn right there. But imagine here, this is where we live here at the surface. This is imagine 850 millibars. If you ever heard someone mention that, imagine this is about 250 millibars, and imagine here is 500. This is about where the start of the upper levels of the atmosphere we start talking about. This is what we're looking at now. Really gives a good idea and a clue for where to forecast. And again, we can kind of use this and oftentimes, see if it makes sense with the surface as well. And that leaves a lot of clues. Helps me forecast and others as well. It's very suggestive of a dynamic upper level energy profile here. And in the current pattern we have here, where we have strong Atlantic and southeastern ridge present here, meaning high pressure that's going to allow moisture to drive upwards up the coast due to our strong ridging, and cold air already in place, right? TPV, polar vortex lobe, and also cold air in behind the previous system as well. So cold air continues to remain in place here. That is not a concern whatsoever. It's really now storm track, and with this ridge so strong, it's going to be hard to stay all snow for the I-95 corridor. In fact, it won't be much snow, in fact, for the 95 corridor. Most of it will be northwest of the 95 corridor, and so that is what's the problem here is we're going to amplify this too soon, and that is going to prevent us from getting an all-out snowstorm. But again, such a dynamic upper level energy profile, doesn't have a super clean face, but still very strong storm, strong wind potential. We're talking 30, 40, 50 plus mile per hour wind gusts, certainly possible. So I'll show you the P-type map here just to get an idea. I mean, a low pressure system that gets into the 980s, maybe even 970s possibly. So a dynamic system. I'll show you the Euro AI kind of as well. Use the P-type map here. I don't mind that. So the idea is, remember, with this ridge here, overrunning precip is going to be occurring, meaning since we're having such a strong ridge, precip is going to get going out ahead in front. And I think there's strong potential here for this to be pretty prolific front end thump of snow. Nothing, again, when we're not talking about, some crazy, maybe like, 18 to 24-inch front end thump. That's very, I can't remember if there has been 18 to 24-inch front end thump. You let me know. But with this storm, what it's going to be here is overrunning precip gets out ahead of the original upper level energy profile here. So you can see, right, if we go back to 500, notice there's our upper level energy still all the way back here, but we have this strong ridge and cold air out and head of front. So snow is going to override the region originally here in the Northeast, and there's going to be an opportunity for at least a widespread, I think, 2 to 5, 3 to 6 inches. And then as we start moving northwest of 95, I think that's when we start seeing the potential for 6+ inches of snow as well. Once we start going, especially north of I 90, northwest of I 95, that's where we start talking about the potential for 6+ inches of snow, at least on the table. And you can't even rule out here also on the backside, as we see this, it's another transfer system. We can't rule out on the backside seeing some snow as well. And I'm also still not certain because look at the press again at 500 millibars. It's going to be very difficult for this storm to power through here. And even though we have such a strong Atlantic Eastern Ridge here, Western Atlantic, but Eastern Ridge here across Caunus, we still have this confluence and we still have this TPV. And I think there's going to be an opportunity here where I think we see, the AIs kind of meet in the middle here with the operationals. And we certainly might have more of a potential for a significant all out snowstorm here in this region, in my opinion. I think it bears very close watching. We would be talking about double-digit snowfall potential here for the northwest, for the interior, sorry, northeast here, and very, very prolific snowfall potential here. We'd be certainly be talking about maybe even as much as 10 to 18 plus inches of snowfall potentially for a wide swath here across the northeast, right? Very significant. Maybe some people's biggest snowstorm of the year across northern New England and northern New York certainly is possible here. So really need to keep a close eye on this. I think there's significant front end thump potential here, and this is definitely just another system that's going to add. I think New York City's at play for front end thump snow. I really think once we start talking north of here, I think there's definitely front end thump snow potential here. I think New York City northward, there's going to be some front end thump potential with that. So at least accumulating snowfall, that's kind of where my mind is with this system right now for this weekend. And again, can't even rule out some back end snow for some places that may switch to freezing rain. That is another concern before we shift to next week. Freezing rain is absolutely a concern. So keep a close eye on that. There could be an accumulating freezing rain. Can't even rule out more than a quarter of inch of ice possible for some people because remember we talk about those levels of the atmosphere at the surface we might remain below freezing, but somewhere here maybe a warm layer above the surface. So what happens is that warm layer allows that raindrop or allows that snowflake to warm up. Imagine this is your 0 degree line and it passes that and then it comes back here towards the surface, and so we could allow for rain to freeze on contact, and that would be a concern here because it would be maybe a more prolific one of the more prolific ice setups we've had all winter across the Northeast and even especially into southern New England and New England. So we need to keep a very close eye on that in that potential there. And then the attention shifts then to next week. And we can keep the AI. It's fine. This is the 18Z AI, but we have a lot of operational and ensemble support, and we'll show that here in a second. And I think this is a very intriguing setup here. I'm not sold on this quite being a snowstorm quite yet, and not that it would be a snowstorm. The fact it's going to hit, the fact it's going to hit. I cannot guarantee. I really am not super confident in that quite yet. I will say though. Um, we've had some systems that show long range, like, January 11th and maybe a couple others or so, and, they haven't gone away. I will say you got to let go of those past systems. I know it's tricky. I know it's hard. You got to, when you're forecasting the system, you have to take away that emotional tie to being and being tied to past systems and letting it affect how you're going to forecast the next system if you're trying to forecast. Right, it's one thing if you're just letting your thoughts out and you're venting. I get that 100%, and I might too if I weren't forecasting this stuff. But what I will say is here, this is we have not had a setup quite like this all winter long. There's been some similarities, maybe some, but we have not had a setup like this all winter long for next week. And I will come out and say right away, this is by far, maybe I don't know by far, but this is I would say, in my opinion, clearly at least the best setup for a blockbuster snowstorm across the Mid Atlantic and Northeast we have had all winter long. And I don't think it's that close, in my opinion, in terms of all out blockbuster potential for the Mid Atlantic and the Northeast widespread. Now, potential, that's the key word. There's no guarantee here. So here's what we got going on in the setup. So obviously, sorry, it's a little try to zoom in a little bit more for you. Will that zoom out too much? There we go. Hopefully that helps a little bit, but I like the whole picture. I like the whole picture, and I like if you're able to see it, so you can zoom in a little bit if you need to. But here's your weekend storm. It wraps up here. So this is your weekend storm. This timing. This is about Monday at this time. So we see this thing wrap up here, and you see this is remember dynamic system this weekend. Wind, rain, snow, all P types are on the play here, are on the table for this. But then in behind it, notice we have this. We have this tail of the confluence and actually part of a TPV lobe associated at the end here of the system actually kind of come on in. The same TPV lobe is actually going to work, and kind of the tail edge of it is actually the same TPV lobe. The edge of it is going to work to spin around and kind of pinwheel around our system. You see that interaction here? Doesn't matter what model you look at. GFS, Euro, same thing. In a different interaction, every model run a little bit different, and so that's the key here. Volatility, Canadian, doesn't matter what model run you look at here at this point. That TPV, it seems like there's been some agreement here in this OZ suite as we're getting closer to the system that this TPV lobe is gonna be present to the back end and close to this upper level energy. And I've seen some comparisons, to like a January 11th. It's a different setup. There may be a couple similar, but it's a different setup here where we're not waiting on some big northern piece to drop in here, which we were in that system. Your stream interaction piece is right there. Your upper level energy that's going to phase with is right here. And this is why I think if this is what has me confident that it's very much on the table here is because a lot of times with these setups, it either happens or it just gets pushed off and it gets delayed. So it's either a big hit or at most, in a non-hit scenario, it's kind of a moderate snowstorm, and even for mid-Atlantic standards, maybe not too much. It would be mid-Atlantic to mid-south to southeast, at most is what it would be in my opinion, and it gets shunted off, and it's a big snowstorm out and more out to sea, so to say. In the other scenario is it either that TPV gets wrapped in. That TPV gets wrapped in. We'll show, one of the more extreme where it gets wrapped in the GFS. And once it gets wrapped into the flow, it's very unlikely you get caught in between. You either wrap it in or you don't. There's very likely with these kind of systems here, you're very likely to get in between. And you know what analog this kind of remind me of? It was different because of the latitude, and maybe there could be some changes, the latitude. But March 7th, 2018, we had a similar setup. It was very different in a sense, but March 7th, 2018, we had a TPV lobe wrap up into our system, a little bit more amplified of a system, I would say, in a little bit less connection of a confluence. The confluence tail was a little bit more disconnected on that system, but March 7th, 2018, if you remember, was a very big snowstorm, very, very big snowstorm. One of those March nor'easters we had, and that one, I don't want to say like do that. Just saying that produced a lot of snow. It's very, very big time setup. So different. I'm just using it as an example of snowstorm that did hit that has a vague similarity to this setup. And so here we notice that TPV lobe pinwheels around, and the southern branch of energy kind of gets caught up of upper level energy, gets caught here out in front, and now start looking at this, and upper level low to start developing here. And this kind of gets wrapped into the system, super cold air in place. And since you're still positively tilted a lot with your upper level energies here, 540 line still kind of positively tilted here, this delays amplification some a little bit, and then eventually this thing gets wrapped up. Your trough starts going neutral and then negative, and look at what happens there. You wrap up a massive upper level, you strong, strong upper level low. You wrap up a massive snowstorm here, and you get a big one from mid Atlantic to New England. A massive, like it would be historic if potentially some historic snowstorm potential. Same thing on the Euro, little bit more a little bit delayed with the amplification here. That doesn't you don't see amplification as early on. You don't see this get behind our system and our upper level energy get out in front of our TPV as late or as soon. And what you see here is a massive snowstorm still from the mid Atlantic and um, into New York City, southern New England. And then here on the Canadian, similar thing, just a tad more delayed with the interaction, but maybe a little bit more cleaner of a phase than the Euro, so to say. Compare that, you can see a little bit more cleaner maybe of a stream interaction that you have here on the Canadian, so it gets pulled in a little bit sooner, but shunts off a little bit more. So you still get a pretty big snowstorm there across places like New York City, southern New England, and into the Mid Atlantic as well. Again, very big snowstorm that would be as well. So what's the point of your showing what are all three major operational models show? The point is to say that they're showing the snowstorm potential. And you see here on the Euro AI 18s, yeah, Euros hasn't came out yet. We'll see what that does. But again, very similar setup here, and it's been showing this kind of for a couple days now. The Euro AI, some variation, just a tick late here from the operational, so it's no technically big hit. It's just offshore, and you miss out. And a lot of people can like to see the surface map, so I'll zoom in a little bit more here so you can see, for example, and again, you can see that how this would be, very but pretty much a scraper. You get a little bit of a hit in the mid Atlantic, but it would be a scraper. And I wouldn't necessarily buy. Again, I think we go all in for a hit, or it gets pushed a little bit more off to sea than that. Um, and even then, that's very close to being an all out major snowstorm. The run before had that. This run does not. You can see the GFS all out major snowstorm, major like one of the more historic things I've seen on a model run. It was one of the crazier ones. You can see the Euro all out major snowstorm as well on that run. Canadian, same thing, all out major snowstorm on that run. Cold air, not a concern on these model runs as well. Maybe for places here in the southeast, not for really anywhere in the mid Atlantic. Really anywhere in the mid Atlantic into Northeast and New England here, and that's where we're looking. That is absolutely where we're looking here with this, with this storm potential next week. And the biggest thing too is the ensemble support. We'll take a look here quickly. Look at the ensemble support we have as well, and we'll go to 500 height anomaly and kind of display that here. I mean, look at this classic 50-50 low setup with Atlantic ridging, though. See that? And that allows amplification to take place. That allows that amplification to take place. Take a look at the GFS ensemble. Very similar setup as well. That's the OZ GFS ensemble. So all the members in the ensemble showing that. Canadian, same thing. I mean, very, very similar setup here now on the OZ ensembles. Maybe some of the most agreement I have seen yet to this point, like all freaking winter long. It's been honestly a ride with model agreement. This is one of the best agreements here on the OZ suite I've seen all winter long, about six-ish days out. So very impressive. And here's the last thing I'll leave you off here, and I'll show you too why the ensembles. Look at all these hits here on these runs. These are all the individual showing all the individual members here on the GFS, and you can see, look at all the major snowstorms they show. There's this, I mean, maybe half of these members at least show some variation of a significant snowstorm, either like scraping or full on hitting. So again, very, very, maybe a little bit less, but there's I mean, it's a pretty good amount showing a significant snowstorm. You can go to the same thing to the Canadian ensemble members. Take a look here. Take a look here. Look at all these members showing significant snowstorm potential. What is this time frame, you may ask? Because I leave that out always a lot of times. Wednesday, Friday is the timing here from the mid south all the way up into the mid Atlantic, the Northeast, and you can't even rule out the Southeast in a more slider scenario as well, and that would be more North Carolina than South Carolina. But again, you can see a ton of major snowstorm showed on the ensemble members here. So if there was a massive spread where it was skewed, that would be a little bit more concerning here. I have not looked at these yet, but we can take a look. And the Euro ensembles are very impressive as well. These are only half of the Euro ensemble members. Take a look. I mean, there are a ton of hits here on this Euro ensemble. Very impressive. go to 26 through 50, right? 50 different members here. And I mean, almost every single one is showing a snowstorm. That is actually very impressive. I mean, very, very, if not just offshore. So, I mean, that is a lot of agreement to have, more agreement than I think we've had for, blockbuster potential at any point this winter. So, the highlight that the threat is definitely there. But I am not quite yet sold on this being an all out snowstorm guaranteed, just because we are 6 days out and models really did just come to more agreement here at the OZ suite just in the last few hours now. So there's still a lot of volatility, and like I'm saying here, it's a low floor, high ceiling setup. If you do not get that TPV lobe, if you do not get a favorable interaction with that southern wave here, if you do not get a favorable upper level interaction here between these two pieces, no snowstorm, no big snowstorm. It turns into another maybe nuisance event to at most a moderate snowstorm and that would be more further south as well. That would get shunted likely and delayed amplification offshore. If those pieces come together, we're talking about blockbuster historic snowstorm potential. And what I mean by historic is maybe not your number one, but we talk about those top 5, top 10 snowfalls all time in your cities. Those are the kind of historic snowstorms, those blockbuster ones we talk about. This would certainly have the potential to do that. And again, really anywhere across southern plains into the mid south, um, into the mid Atlantic, northeast New England. I think even to parts of the Midwest here, Ohio Valley, certainly on play here. I think to see a significant snowstorm next week during this time. So again, I wanted to give you guys a good video breakdown because we're not live streaming tonight, obviously. But this is the idea for what might happen next week. But don't overlook this weekend quite yet. There's still some very significant potential with that, especially across New England and the Northeast. So keep a close eye on how models maybe meet somewhere in the middle, the AIs and the operational, and let's see where we start going with next week. Certainly, probably going to be tracking this at a minimum, regardless of if this hits or not. But there's certainly the potential there for a massive snowstorm, but I can't guarantee that this is definitely coming at this time. It would be irresponsible to you, and I have no business being able to guarantee that at this point. But let's keep following it closer. And again, we will likely be either doing a video or a live stream Friday during the day or Friday night, late Friday night stream, and possibly could be as well. I am a little busy, so we'll see how that goes. But again, and then we'll look to do more live streams this weekend, all likelihood as well. So I appreciate everybody tuning in here, and I hope you all have a great night, great day whenever you are watching this, and consider hitting that like and subscribing. It helps tremendously. Thank you all. Peace.